Today, we'll be talking about the infamous Star Wars holiday special, and I'm pleased to introduce a very special guest, Emmy Award-winning writer, novelist, and playwright whose play Special tells the story of how the aforementioned Star Wars holiday special came to TV screens in 1978, Mr. Andrew Osborne.
Hello?
So, for our listeners who are not familiar with Special, your play, could you briefly explain what it's about?
What it's about is a behind the scenes making of the Star Wars holiday special, which is regarded as the worst thing ever on TV. And just it doesn't make any sense if you see it. No part of it makes any sense whatsoever. And so it's the story of the nonsensical events that led up to the creation of this fiasco involving George Lucas and all the Star Wars people, but also, all these 1970s variety show people who got into a weird alliance to make this terrible show. And so, like, comedy writers like Bruce Valanche and a woman who produced the Carol Burnett show and Jefferson Starship and mimes. And it's a very strange story that may have, at least in our version, uh, there's also it also maybe contributed to the end of George Lucas's marriage and the start of just marketing toys as entertainment being the most important force in show business. So it's a goofy story, but it has some larger implications.
No, well, that is certainly true. And I should say that I was lucky enough to actually see a production of Special in Los Angeles, I think in January 2019. Was that the last time you mounted a production of Special?
Yeah. Well, no, actually, it played in 2019 in LA. And then there was another production of it in Northern California with a different company that somehow heard about it and they just wanted to put it on. And then
Oh,
we were
cool.
going to do a, oh, wait, no. So I think, like, yeah, it was 2019, the one you saw. And then the next one was later in 2019. And then we were going to move to a larger theater in LA in 2020. But then, womp, womp,
Then
COVID.
2020
So
happened. Yeah.
2020 happened.
So right now you are actually in the process of, or the planning stages of adapting your play Special to graphic novel format. Is that correct?
That is correct, because we had an illustrator who did some of the graphics for the stage show, Jared Boone. And sometime in the middle of COVID, I started thinking, well, hey, if we can't do any, theatrical restagings, maybe we could start working on a graphic novel. So we have like, we have about 16 pages done now. And so, but we want to do more and finish the whole thing. So we're going to launch that Kickstarter on Star Wars Day, which of course is May the 4th. You can sign up for that in advance at specialtheplay.com, which was the website for the play and is now becoming the website for the graphic.
Got it. Got it. When you mentioned that, I was really excited to hear that because I really enjoyed the play very much. And I was telling a lot of my friends about it. But unfortunately, play, it sort of has to exist in physical space. And we're not really doing that anymore. I do think the play that you wrote really lends itself to that format because there are a lot of characters, a lot of scene changes. You jump around in time and everything. So I think that that's a really great dimension to the story on the page. I think it'll work really, really well. So it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think it'll make it easier especially for people who aren't, deep Star Wars heads who already know a lot of the cast of characters to keep track of everything. Because, as you know from seeing the play had a cast of 6 people. It was 4 men, 2 women, and a special guest star. Um, and those 7 people had to play like I don't about 100 parts, and they would just keep switching back and forth. There was one actor who had to play 2 CBS executives, and they would argue with each other in the scene, which was fine, and it like added a lot of energy to the play. But I think, like, in graphic novel form, you can see the actual locations and the actual people, which should help to clarify things for anyone who didn't understand what was going on in the play.
Although I will
No,
say, when I was reading it, the once I got the character list like straight in my head, it was surprisingly easy to like follow and like remember who is who.
well, that's
So I
good
don't
to
know why
hear.
that was. I think it was just because the way that you grouped some of the characters, because there's Steve and George were I think the same actor.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
Steve being the one who, so George Lucas conceived of the Star Wars holiday special as a way of, so Star Wars, had been this major hit, but it was taking a long time to get the sequel going. And, executives were starting to worry that the Star Wars magic was going to wear off. And so they figured, oh, well, we'll do a TV version and that'll keep people interested. So George Lucas really didn't want to do it at first, but then he had some ideas, mostly involving Wookiees, a lot of Wookiees, a lot of just Wookiee grunting. And so that is sort of how that came to be. And then he, at a certain point, just abandoned the project entirely. And the first director got fired. And so Steve was the guy who came in. He was an old TV vet who managed to, like, sort of bring this mess in for a landing. Uh, and then pretended,
Kind of got left holding the bag,
I think probably left it off
um,
his resume
as
the
it
rest
were.
of his life. There was nothing but, technical difficulties during the making of it. Like they didn't pump air into the masks of the people playing aliens, so they were passing out on the set. They didn't have enough money to like build the big holiday special set in the that sort of was what the whole show was about. So yeah, disastrous on every level.
Yeah, I had seen the holiday special when I was a kid, and I was certainly aware of its reputation, but I wasn't aware until I saw your show, or I guess I never really thought about the perspective of the people who actually worked on it, and the idea that the production of the special itself, like, was also kind of a train wreck. So that was sort of something I learned from your play. And along those lines, out of curiosity, how did this come to be? What made you write this play about the making of the Star Wars holiday special? I presume you were already a Star Wars fan. Is that
Oh
is
yeah,
that a fair? Yeah.
and still, deeply traumatized by watching the, Star Wars holiday special when it originally aired, and there are two characters in the play, one of whom sort of represents me,
I
where
figured that.
just a young geeky preteen, very, very, very excited to finally get some more Star Wars after seeing the movie in theaters like 12 or 13 times, and then just waiting for more Star Wars to enjoy. And then it was going to be right on TV, and it only took about, I don't know, about 20 minutes in, you just realize, oh, this is what is happening. This is not only is it not Star Wars, you're ruining Star Wars. You're suddenly making Star Wars seem terrible. Which of course George Lucas himself would later go on to do, ironically. But no, so it always sort of stuck with me, and I just thought it would be a funny, because every now and then, like an article would come out, or you'd hear, somebody interviewed about it, and all the stories just sounded so crazy that I started just figuring, now this is because I love movies about behind the scenes stuff of, like, uh, trying to think of one off the top of my head, but I mean, they're actually doing one coming up about the making of The Godfather, and
Yeah.
I'm always interested in those behind the scenes stories. And I was amazed that nobody had done it for the Star Wars holiday special. So I wrote a screenplay, and I was starting to try to pitch it around. But then I had a friend who I had worked with in LA theater before, who was another, fellow Star Wars head. And I sent him the script and he loved it. And next thing I knew, he had somehow, I still don't know how he did it, but he got Lance Guest to agree to play Han Solo. And Lance Guest was an actual star pilot in The Last Starfighter and had this sort of cult following of his own. And so I thought, well, all right, I guess we're doing a play then. Oh,
It's really
So
and the other thing was, it was also the 40th anniversary of the first and only airing of the Star Wars Holiday Special.
oh,
So it
perfect.
seemed like, okay, well, we got to do it right now. This is the time.
no, yeah, definitely. So that's interesting. A lot of things you said just really make a lot of sense. The idea that you're into movies that are sort of behind the scenes of movies, because, one of the things that is really clear to me, both when I first saw the play and in rereading it in preparation for this, is full disclosure. I also, at one time, for years on and off, I was writing a screenplay that covered a facet of the behind the scenes of Star Wars. So I read, Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. I read Skywalking, the Dale Pollock, George Lucas biography, and I read all the making ofs and countless articles and magazines and stuff. And one of the things that really struck me about Special was that even though it's sort of a heightened version of events, like there was this feeling of authenticity throughout. There were these details and the characterizations. I immediately could tell, like, oh, like this guy read all that stuff. Like he knows exactly what he's talking about. Like he isn't like making all this up.
Yeah. And the larger context too, like the like of other things that these people were involved in around the same time. Like Carrie Fisher's was Leave Yesterday Behind was the TV movie I think that you mentioned or like referenced.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then like George Harrison. I looked that up. It was combo like I think what he recorded here. He like filmed his like one of his tours that wasn't ever released. Um, is
Okay.
that is that what happened there?
Now I'm trying to remember what the George Harrison part was.
He mentions it was very quick. He mentions that like George Harrison called him from a
Oh, that yeah,
tea
that's
room, and yeah,
That's right. That's right. You know what? I think that was just a throwaway line. I didn't that just happened to wind up being true because it
really,
is. I think there's definitely like research about what like Harrison Ford I think was in the Guns of Navarone at the time, and the
Right.
interesting thing about it is that they really weren't the actors weren't rich and famous. And George Lucas had just suddenly become, well, he'd already done American Graffiti. And so he already had kind of a stop and start career going, but these were all just people just trying to make a living, and so they were taking any crummy jobs they could, even though they were in the biggest movie of all time, which is kind of a fun aspect of it. But there was a lot I mean, I had read like, histories of it and I had heard different things over the years. For instance, one of the things after I think the script was written or right around the time the script was being written, it came out that like Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher had definitely had an affair. So that
Right.
sort of entered into it that like, oh, wait a minute. So at the time they were doing the special, there was probably a little sexual tension going on there. And then like when I needed information, I had to go down some weird rabbit holes. Like I found out, I found out all like this information about Marsha Lucas, who was George Lucas's wife at the time, and how the first cut of Star Wars was just a disaster, and she had to come in and just save the movie with her editing skills. But she was trying to get as she wanted a non-Star Wars life, and so like her story, there's not a lot of information out there. But then some stuff was just kind of we were just guessing at, and you may if you see her read the play, one of the characters is Bruce Valanche, who's a legendary comedy writer. And my director friend, Care Lordigan, again, he, with his mystical ways, also somehow got the script to Bruce, and we were hoping he would love it, but quite the opposite was true. And he sent us an angry email about all the inaccuracies, which is why
Really?
we
is
then
that
did a rewrite where the Bruce Valanche character keeps interrupting the play to say how it's all fake. It's just you shouldn't believe anything you're hearing. He didn't like the way he was portrayed, and even though we clearly love Bruce Valanche, and then he
Sure.
came to see the show because he's such a good sport and like took photos with the guy playing him. So he's a multi-layered man, that Bruce Valanche. But he will tell you that it is a true-ish story. A lot of stuff is true. A lot of stuff is sort of in a hazy gray area.
did he object to being portrayed as that flamboyant? Because I remember that's one of the where it's like, by the way, I'm not this flamboyant in real life.
Yeah, we actually like tried to tone it down, except that because Bruce Valanche is actually pretty dry despite his crazy, hairdo, but but I think I was thinking of Bruce Valanche from when he was on Hollywood Squares, and he took over from Paul Lynde, I think, as the guy who always said the craziest things, and a lot of his quotes were pretty crazy. So he may have said them in a more sort of dry way, but he still got some pretty crazy, he's a fun-loving guy, so that's what we were trying to get across.
That's so interesting that he had that reaction, but then when all is said and done, he showed up for a performance.
I know. Well, he's a showbiz,
Yeah.
showbiz people. It's a love-hate thing with showbiz.
Maybe he just wanted to be involved before he started to like it.
I mean, I guess I guess he also figured, it's just going to be on stage for a few weeks. It reminded me of that Seinfeld episode where Kathy Griffin plays another comic who starts making fun of Jerry, and the more the more trouble he gives her, like the bigger her act gets. And I think he was trying to nip it in the bud. Like he was like, well, maybe if I just make nice with them, it'll just go away. So sorry, but we do love you, Bruce. We love.
So I don't know if one of the revisions you made in response to that was sort of you have these very funny and I think well-positioned disclaimers at the beginning. So right up front, you're sort of cueing the audience to the idea that like, hey, this isn't coming out of nowhere. But that said, like, we made a lot of it up. Like, we're here to entertain you, to tell a story, right?
Well, and the disclaimers were mostly, they were there from the beginning just because it's Disney intellectual property now, and nobody messes with the mouse. Disney's a company that'll go after like little, tiny child daycare centers if they paint an unauthorized mouse on their wall. So we made sure that the story was not only tangentially about Star Wars, it's mainly about the real life people. It's a form of journalism, really. So for instance, our Wookiees, they were just paper bags that looked vaguely simian. Yes, exactly. There you go.
Yeah. There was another one of the performances. It looked actually pretty cool. Like the bags they almost looked like little ghillie suits. Like,
oh yeah. Well, one of our actors, Marty, you actually, I started with the paper bag concept, and then he totally tricked it out and made it look much better, but not copyrighted. So that's why we had to be very careful with all that stuff.
Because I mentioned that at one time I was working on a screenplay about Marsha Lucas and her relationship with George Lucas, which I realized the stuff that was really fascinating to me about that story was going to put me in a position of like having to write scenes about these real human beings' personal lives that I just felt really uncomfortable about. I went back and forth, and at the end of the day, I just landed on, you know what? I don't want to write this because it doesn't feel like it's my right to make things up about somebody's personal life. I mean, imagine if you went and you saw a movie, somebody dramatized a romantic relationship from your past that like left you emotionally changed for the rest of your life, and like some nobody was like, oh yeah, I mean this would make a great movie, and then they like made up all these intimate moments of your life. So that is to say that I was grappling with that. How do I make it clear that a lot of this is sort of my own extrapolation, my own dramatization? And then when I saw Special, I was like, these guys nailed it, because you made it funny. So by bringing the humor out, that sort of immediately disarms the audience, and like they could sort of never forget that this is an interpretation of something real.
There's an immediate reason why it exists.
I think it helps too if you can see things from people's, from sort of both sides. Like I just felt really bad sort of for both of them, even though their careers were going great. That he's just, I mean, by all accounts, George Lucas is just a very intense guy, real workaholic, and she's just exasperated with him for not giving much of himself to her. And and I'm a bit of a workaholic, so I can sort of relate to that with my own wife, who gets very exasperated with me sometimes for so I mean, I thought it was interesting, but I liked also that it was funny, but I think that it also brought in sort of a relatable I mean, it was true. I mean, it just happened to be in the story, but it kind of, I think for people who aren't totally aware of what's going on with Star Wars, they, that part of the play, they're like, oh yeah, I get, I get
Right.
marital tensions.
Yeah.
I don't know about
Right.
Wookiees, but I know about, I know that look she's giving him right now.
Exactly. Exactly. So in all of your research, was there anything you learned or that you discovered that surprised you that you were like, oh, well, I have to put that in the play?
I mean, there was so much stuff. Like there was stuff like that I couldn't wedge in because with the
Yeah.
Marcia and George thing, apparently, I can't think of the person's name, but apparently somebody he was collaborating with on the Empire Strikes Back script, like had a heart attack and maybe died. I can't remember if they died or not. But so he was so that was like, oh my God, that's insane. All these insane things happened around the Star Wars holiday special. I mean, you mentioned George Harrison, but there was also the weird thing about that Steve Binder, who came in to 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 take over the filming, had done the Elvis comeback special, which is insane. He had worked with Shields and Yarnell,
Yeah.
so of course we had to bring in some mime action. I mean, there are just so many weird, conflicting, because it's the 70s. It's it's not just a Star Wars story or a showbiz story, but it's a 70s showbiz story. So it was this weird, like you mentioned that Pictures at a Revolution, which is such a great book, which is that same era when the old school Hollywood is just completely crashing against the new school and like the new directors and the youth culture and everything else. And that was all happening around the time of the Star Wars holiday special too. Just these weird people. You're like, how are these people ever in the same room together?
I had to look up the Shields and Yarnell Christmas at Walt Disney World special after reading that, and like that was they were because they appear they were a husband and wife mime team, and they appear as like babies in that and they act out being a baby. So I had to like see what that looked like, and I was even wilder than I was expecting because they end up with their thumbs in each other's mouths and they're sucking each other's thumbs. And
In these long scenes, like, because everything's so fast paced now, you
yeah,
forget that like, TV used to just go on and on endlessly with these non-funny bits. And I hope that anyone listening who hasn't seen it will go search the YouTube video of the Donny and Marie show Star Wars holiday tribute, which we I didn't want to show it during the play because it was copyrighted, but it's so bizarre that we just had to throw up a clip of it, So it's kind of like I compare it to how like everybody says Ed Wood, who did like Plan 9 from Outer Space, and everybody says, oh, his movies are so terrible. And they are, but they're at least interesting. And like, but people say, oh, the acting is so wooden, and it's just so, but it's like, well, yeah, but look at mainstream movies at the time. They were
yeah.
even worse because they didn't have like Vampira and Tor Johnson in them. They just had the bad dialogue and the bad acting. So it's kind of like, you look at the Star Wars holiday special and it's terrible, but you also have to say, yes, it's terrible, but look at every other 70s variety show, It's compared to those, it's not quite as terrible. And at least it had the cool cartoon with Boba Fett.
Which is, I think everyone acknowledges the best thing about the holiday special is the Boba Fett cartoon.
I don't, like within the special, the holiday special itself, I never really realized before last time I watched it that Lumpy is watching that as if it's like a real life document. Like it's supposed to be happening, and like
It is in his hologram machine.
yeah.
Which is a metaverse kind of thing, because he's like watching a show about things that are actually happening in the universe he's living in, which doesn't really make sense.
But it's animated.
It's animated for some reason.
No, yeah, that was something that stuck out to me on this watch. But Andrew, you mentioned something really interesting. One of the other things I really loved about Special was exactly what you said, is like, it's not just about the behind the scenes of the Star Wars holiday special. It's also sort of a window into the very end of this tradition of the variety show on TV. So it gave me the thought, like maybe one of the reasons why Star Wars holiday special just seems so wrong is because the way you alluded to in the beginning of this was how Star Wars created a new blueprint for how films and movies are marketed. And like, so you have Star Wars married to this really kind of retro, no longer relevant format that was kind of on the wane. So you like have the meeting of this tradition of the variety show and all of the career writers and directors and talent who created those meeting up with like the next thing. And it's like trying to meld them together when at the end of the day, like that was a marriage that was never going to work out.
And it does, there is sort of a, it's interesting because like, it would be interesting if George Lucas had stayed more involved and they had given him like total control and probably way more money than they could afford. But, because he had sort of an interesting sort of side Star Wars story in mind. Yeah. But it just would have been impossible to pull off on a TV budget. And then he just dropped it all. It's kind of like, I think like, to cross my geekdom streams, it's very, very much, I never thought about it until just a second, but it's very much the difference between the first season of Twin Peaks when David Lynch was like in charge of every detail, and then the horrible second season of Twin Peaks when he wasn't involved, and just people were directing episodes of, MacGyver or whatever were coming in, and it's like, oh yeah, what's the thing? Oh yeah, Twin Peaks. Okay, I'm gonna add some weird stuff because this is the weird show, right? And it just like it looked like Twin Peaks still, but just it had this crazy, awful new personality, and that's what the Star Wars Holiday Special is for the most part. It looks like Star Wars, but it's like an Invasion of the Body Snatchers Star Wars that's just filled with mediocrity.
Perfect.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I think some of George Lucas's ideas for what this could have become, they are halfway interesting. The first 20 minutes of the special where it's just Wookiees grunting at each other. I mean, obviously it doesn't work, but on another level, the idea that this was actually on TV is fucking bonkers.
It's hallucinatory.
Yes, exactly. So on one level, it's like sort of mesmerizing and incredible. Like I can't believe that this actually made it to television. But what you made me realize is like, yeah, I mean, what did they expect? If you were to try to make a Star Wars movie, but as a live 3-camera TV show, like, what do you think you're going to get?
Because Star Wars itself is weird. Like you said before, it's meant putting the thing of Star Wars into the variety show formats, but it's like it already is a weird thing. It just kind of works like in the original format.
Well, so for instance, like, I mean, I remember like watching it and just being so horrified because it wasn't Star Wars. But then you got to that little oasis of the cartoon where you're like, okay, well, but this isn't Star Wars either, but at least it's kind of a cartoon of Star Wars that's taking place in the Star Wars universe. But then after that, there's also the thing where you have B. Arthur, 70s TV star, later Golden Girl, who is in her own little reality in the, Star Wars Cantina. And they've got like all the aliens from the Star Wars Cantina. So comparatively, it looks the most like Star Wars of anything else. But then you have like Harvey Korman coming in and doing dumb gags. But it's kind of like by that point, you'd been so beaten down by the show and like how bad it was that I remember like I had a little affection for that scene because I was like, all right, well, whatever this is, okay, at least I guess B. Arthur, Harvey Korman, he's in love with B. Arthur. And I don't know, I'm in this weird middle space now where I'm like, all right, well, I guess I kind of care about this story, which is kind of Star Wars. There's a musical number. And then they closed the bar down. And I remember I felt bad. It's like, oh no. Oh, she's not going to see her friends at the bar anymore. And then I thought, what's happening to me? Why am I giving this the benefit of the doubt? It's complicated. It's a complicated show to unpack.
That just reminded me of that part in your play when you pointed out like pouring the booze in his head.
Well, and that part, I mean, like when I saw it, I don't know, it must have been 13, maybe, I guess. I can't remember the exact time. But, I was not, and I knew it was dumb. And I was like, how do grown adults, well, I guess they thought they were doing a kiddie show. and adults always try to dumb stuff down for kids,
Yeah.
as opposed to, which is silly though, because in the 70s, we loved Bugs Bunny cartoons, growing up. And I loved the Muppet Show and stuff because it wasn't written down to us. It was just, and it's like Pixar movies now. It's for kids, but it's adults trying to make adults laugh, So I didn't know why they had all this childish stuff. But then it's like somehow all that childish stuff wound up in the actual Star Wars movies. I mean, like,
Sure,
if you look at the the two the sportscasters in the pod race in the Phantom Menace, and the kid going yippee, and like they're doing, I mean, that could have been right out of the Star Wars holiday special. It was just
definitely
dumb. They didn't have the excuse of it was a bad variety show. It's like, no, they're actually doing that in the movie now. Jar Jar Binks could have strolled right into a Star Wars holiday special and not looked out of place. So
I would love to have seen 1978 holiday specials Jar Jar Binks. That would.
George Lucas, I think, took the wrong lesson from those holiday specials somehow.
But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the Mind Evaporator,
which is like softcore pornography, strangely enough. Yeah.
I just read, I think somebody, I don't know if it was the first time this was ever revealed, but somebody involved with Star Wars, just like in November, posted on Twitter that Joe Johnston, that was originally a concept that Joe Johnston like designed, and I think it was called the Environmental Transporter. And the point was to show like how the positive like Wookiee outlook on life, like that's what it was like, supposed to be this kind of like wholesome thing. So it's kind of funny that it just turned into the Mind Evaporator, which I don't know what it's supposed to be. I just like that it's going into, you're seeing like Itchy's, you're getting a real insight into like Itchy's mind, because he creates that character.
I mean, it's Diane Carroll, so he's I mean, it's a pretty good character to come up with, cooing in your weird Wookiee here,
One of the problems, it seems to me, is really the variety show format. Because like you were just talking about, we get, it's like it's a Star Wars story, but then all of a sudden we have like these acrobatic mimes, like, doing a show. We stop there for 5 or 10 minutes. And then Diane Carroll shows up, and then we're in the Diane Carroll show for 10 minutes. Then Jefferson Starship. So whenever something starts happening that is like halfway good, like the show completely stops and does something like completely wacky that totally interrupts the flow, and then you're like, okay, I guess now I'm watching this weird Julia Child by way of like droid, like I don't know, like Harvey Korman's in drag, and it's like not a funny bit, and it keeps going on and on and on, and it's just like, what is this? So I'm wondering if it's like I don't know if it's an indictment of the variety's format as a whole, or if it's just a bad idea for these two particular styles to be put together. It's probably that. It's probably that.
There is one of the things that we got from Bruce Valanche. I think I'm remembering this correctly, because when we're emailing, he said something that became a line in the play, which was, that this was just all disposable. They weren't expecting it to, they just thought it was a paycheck. They were just pumping out some Star Wars. Like, he had worked in variety shows, and you didn't watch him again. It was just taking up space, and somebody would come out and plug their album and stuff, so he didn't think he was going to be haunted by it for the next 40 years, and I think that there's some truth to that, like, as bad as it is, they thought that would be it. And Pat Proft, who was one of the writers of it, along with Lenny Rips, and they, like Bruce Valanche, were the writers, and like Bruce Valanche, Lenny Rips actually did show up to see the play, and he was laughing all the way through it, and he said, "Yeah, it seems." As opposed to Bruce Valanche, he was like, "No, this seems pretty accurate, actually." And so people's memories of it are different too. And he admitted, like, he wasn't there the whole time. He was only there like at the beginning. And then he was objecting to things like, there's a party where he and Pat Proft got together to watch the show, and they had friends, and they were just horrified when they saw the final production, and they had to turn everything off. But like Lenny, in the play, for various reasons, it's at Pat's house, and Lenny was like, "Yeah, it was all pretty accurate, but that party was at my house." So it's like, people are like fine with letting stuff go as long as it isn't directly about them. Is something I learned from this.
No, that's very true.
Yeah, and that's one of the trivia facts that's apparently like the show, it's Star Wars on TV, but as soon as the cartoon was done, like it lost in the ratings to a Love Boat rerun, which is just crazy. And I keep, they say all this stuff, like, and I don't know, there are some people who, I mean, you mentioned like Shields and Yarnell later, and you said they were a mime husband and wife couple. And like, I'm old enough that I just assume everyone knows what I'm talking about. But I said, it's a Love Boat thing. And there's a line about Larry Storch, and like a lot of people are like, I don't know who any of these people are. I don't know what any of these shows are. So, but I'm glad, I'm glad that when people see it and get the gist of it and go, okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but I get what's going on.
At least names I've heard, even if
I got the Larry Storch joke.
And so that warms my heart, but it's my favorite line in the show.
Oh, good. Okay. Where do you think the holiday special went wrong? Do you think there's a good version of this that was possible, or do you think it was just an ill-conceived idea from the word go?
I do, because I mean, it was probably a bad idea from the get-go, but there was some, and I have to be careful because sometimes I forget, like, wait, did I make that up, or was that based on something? But I think it was true that George Lucas really was interested in Nelvana in animation, and he had seen like a little half-hour thing that they did that was like a Cosmic Christmas, I think, and he saw that and he said, "Oh, okay, that's actually pretty good." And it's science fiction on a budget, but it's got like a real vision. And I think like one of the problems is that I think it's like 2 hours long, or it's way too long. I think that if they had made a half an hour show, it could have been more concentrated. It could have been more, there could have been like one vision guiding it. And I think that also happened in entertainment in general as well, where just these things became just big and bloated. And it's just, I mean, a lot of movies today are just, they're like these little bits, and some of them are better than others, but it's just like, it's in a thing that goes on and on and on. And you're like, what? The 90-minute version of this really might have been good, but the part 1 3 hour that's going to be followed by another 3 hour part for a story that's got about 90 minutes of story. Yeah. Bloat is a big problem with the special.
It's so interesting you said that, because my takeaway from this most recent viewing, which I watched it the whole way through, probably for the first time in 20 some odd years, if not the first time I actually watched it the whole way through, my overall impression was like, this should be half as long.
Yeah.
Because like there were some individual things in there. I'm like, okay, like that's an interesting moment, or I see what the idea was there, and like there's something there, but it just goes, it's not cohesive. It's just all over the place. And there's so much breathing room. Like you could do like a whole yoga breathing exercise and like not have missed anything.
But then there's the other side of it, which is that like George Lucas, as we came to discover, also had some very bad instincts, and I don't know, again, like and a lot of them started showing up later. So maybe they wouldn't have shown up, because this was between Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, when people, I mean, he had done American Graffiti, which is great. I mean, it's inconceivable to me that George Lucas somehow did a movie that was so character-based and just so funny and so good. I love Star Wars. Most people say The Empire Strikes Back is better. I'll fight on that. The first Star Wars is better hill, but nevertheless, and they're pretty good. But then as you go along, like some of George Lucas's weirder impulses come in. And so, and again, I don't think he's responsible, but like there is some weird stuff in the Star Wars holiday special that goes beyond like the variety show thing, like the fact that, you know, the Wookiee, I guess it's Chewbacca's wife, he comes back, and you know that she's the female Wookiee because she's wearing like an apron, and so there's some of that weird 70s stuff, and then there's like there are these like other levels of it that you watch that you didn't necessarily notice at the time, but you look back on, like Carrie Fisher's really super glassy eyes every time she's on screen, and you know, there's all these other layers to it that are sort of meta beyond the special itself, but they're still sort of captured there in the whole 70s-ness of it. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but there might have been a good. I think if the whole thing had been animated, that might have been actually good
Yeah.
instead
Yeah,
of
that
kind of cult classic good.
yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. I think, yeah, I mean, one of the problems I think is just like the medium of television, like the video-ness of it, like the live TV sort of look of it all, like just feels really wrong and it's a little bit off-putting. Like I think on a subconscious level, I think that that's a big part of it. It just like feels wrong, like aesthetically.
And especially because like, you know, if you think about it, like Doctor Who episodes were on video, you know, but you just sort of, that was the look of Doctor
Right.
Who. You just sort of bought into it because that's what Doctor Who always looked like. But Star Wars, nothing had ever looked like Star Wars. I mean, I think like
Right.
the only things that came close were maybe like Wizard of Oz, in terms of just like everything I'm looking at on screen is just, I've never seen anything like this, you know, or 2001. And I'm sure there are like other examples, but I know it blew my mind when especially because everything was so gritty and realistic in 70s films. And then to just be in a complete fantasy world where everything looked good. I mean, I say, for the most part, give or take, and I'm talking about the original, if you can ever get your hands on the original, and of course George Lucas has tried to wipe it out and he's put all these digital effects in it, but like the special effects hold up today, you know.
Yeah.
And like I saw 2001 on the big screen, and it looks like it was shot in space, as opposed to stuff that comes out like yesterday where it just
Yeah.
looks completely fake, you know. So I think that was part of it too, that Star Wars, not only was it the variety show and, you know, meeting the new filmmaking, but it was also kind of like this realism giving way to like the beginning of geek culture, where everything was just realistic, and then this complete fantasy world came in, and that was clashing too. So well, yeah, there's a lot
Yeah,
going on
yeah.
in that special.
'Cause I think you're exactly right. Part of what made Star Wars, and like so unlike what people had ever seen before was that sense of, oh, like this feels real. But then when you see it rendered in this like low budget live TV kind of vibe where it's like it all
The
looks
lighting,
fake, it's
especially.
like the lighting is flat and weird, it completely loses at least 50% of what made Star Wars, right? Like what was unique about it. I mean, it's just gone. It's like you show the alien masks in the cantina, like you shoot them a certain way and they
Yeah.
look one way in the movie, but then you see them on like the live sound stage under this light, like it all
Although that
looks
was the most cinematic part
like
because of Akamba.
it was.
That's right. That's right. The director who got fired because he didn't know how to direct TV. He was a filmmaker, which poor guy.
God
But
love
it's true. That probably is the best looking part. But I mean, I think it's like, you know, I think that happened with, I mean, it's happening with movies all the time now that they're in you know, the more HD it gets, the more fake everything suddenly looks. I mean, because that's the whole thing about theater, you know, and then film is, you know, you can go and watch this amazing play, but then when the lights come up, you're just like, oh, everybody's just got all this caked on makeup and everything looks just what was magical a minute ago. Like it completely, suddenly you're like, oh, this is just show business. This isn't like a
Right.
galaxy far, far away. This is just more Hollywood crap, you know. And it kind of like, yeah, it was a little bit of a, you know, finding out there's no Easter bunny.
In your play, George Lucas, like, he was like really into the animation from the beginning, like working with an animation company. Do you know if that's like pretty much true? Or
I do think that's true. And I think like another one of the things that just, you know, with foresight is funny is that like apparently Mark Hamill really liked doing the animation, you know, which of course would lead on to him having a great career in voice acting. But yeah, no, I think he did. And it really worked out for that Canadian company because they went on to do other shows with George Lucas like Droids and Ewoks. So, you know, wasn't a
Um,
total disaster for everybody.
one of my takeaways from rewatching it recently was Harrison Ford is genuinely pretty good in this. Fry made the observation, well, yeah, well, that's because he's supposed to be grumpy the whole time and he doesn't want to be there. And I was like, fair point, fair point.
And apparently, one of the things that didn't make it into the special, I think there's a line about it, but apparently George Lucas in his backstory thought, oh, well, you know, Han Solo, like it fit into his overall worldview because he was like, well, Han Solo knows Chewbacca. And so he's clearly been to the Wookiee planet. And, you know, Han Solo has probably fooled around with a Wookiee. He had a Wookiee wife at one point. I'm like, now where's that movie? That's a prequel. I do want to say
that's like I in the special. I love the line Han Solo's line like, "Why do I always think taking you home for Life Day is going to be easy?" And I always just like, what does that mean? Like, is it always they always like run into some form of trouble every time he goes there? And I just love the idea that he. I mean, it makes sense because they're such good friends, but like he just always takes him home for Life Day. And I just like, and now that fits into like him at some point when he's going to take him home to Life Day, meeting a nice Wookiee and marrying her for a while.
And that's so sweet. I actually have a friend, like, you know, my parents for many years, like, had a Christmas caroling party, and I had a grumpy friend who I'd always drag to it, and he never wanted to go. He didn't like Christmas caroling. So I think I can really appreciate that's a very realistic dynamic around the holidays.
Well, that implies that we have missed out on decades of holiday specials that by all rights we someone should dramatize. Like apparently they always have some wacky misadventure and I want to see them. I want to see what happened every year.
Now, you know, hopefully Jon Favreau will hear that because, you know, he did do sort of an updated version of a special, which I think I haven't seen yet. But I think that
was it the Lego one?
Yeah.
Like it's like a
I
Lego
think,
one?
yeah.
Could I ask you guys a question? This is a little bit off topic, but so I don't know if you are aware, but either yesterday or the day before, as we're recording this, the Skywalker Saga Lego game, I think, was released. It just kind of hit me like, why are these Lego Star Wars things such a big deal? I don't understand. Like, I'm a big Star Wars fan. I was once upon a time really into Legos. I don't understand why this is a thing. I just don't get it.
I think part of it is like the video games too. Like a lot of I've only played like one or two of them, but like people just love those video games. So,
but they're Legos. Like, why? I mean, like, if you're making a video game, like, why do they have to be Legos?
I think now I'm going to just pull in my personal bias here, just so
Please.
I like to say it as much as possible, and this just gives me another chance, and it might possibly be true. The thing about Legos is they're silly and they're Legos. So you can just have fun. You can just have fun doing Star Wars with Legos, which Star Wars was supposed to be. It started out fun. And then they put in it got a little darker in The Empire Strikes Back, but it wasn't meant to be Greek tragedy. And then suddenly people got it in their head that like it had to be the most serious, it's like, more serious than Schindler's List, because it's like, oh, the darkness, Father, with Han Solo, I have to kill you because the darkness is eating me up. And it's just like, no. What are you doing? It's a goofy space action movie. And so you can't do that with the very serious themes of darkness eating you up in the later movies. But with the Legos, you can just have fun. That's why I liked Solo because it was just fun. It went back to just, that's right. Star Wars is supposed to be fun.
The Legos are,
they're
literally giving you permission to play with action figures. Yeah.
Yes.
You know what? I think you're onto something. I think you're exactly right because it's permission to have fun.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean,
okay.
Star Wars.
I think you brought me around.
Yeah.
I think you brought me around.
No, the first movie is so fun, which I still call Star Wars. I don't call it A New Hope because it was Star Wars. And it is filled with funny lines, like the banter between Han Solo and and Princess Leia is great. You know, there's still lines that people quote all these years later. And I think that was another thing that was missing from the special, because it was like, it was kind of smart, you know, it was like just Han Solo and Carrie, or Han Solo and Princess Leia, they were both sort of wise asses, you know, and so they were making these just wisecracks and sort of flirting with each other, and it was kind of, you know, it was somewhat sophisticated. I mean, not sophisticated maybe in the big capital S way, but like, that's why part of the reason I loved Star Wars. And then just when you get to the special, it's just this dopey, like, kindergarten humor and none of that, you know, and you have like just Princess Leia saying, "We must celebrate life day." And it's like, no, I want to see you bantering with Han Solo. I want to see the two of you in the kitchen complaining about, like, oh my God, you know, like that, the holiday conversation of just like, oh my God, Chewbacca's wife can't cook at all. This food is terrible. You know, just I want to hear the complaining and wisecracking. And there's almost none of that, you know.
I would like to see that version of the holiday special.
See the Jon Favreau show; it'll have plenty of that.
Exactly. This thought just occurred to me. So, hearing your take on Star Wars and what you like about it, would you rather sit down and watch the holiday special or the Phantom Menace?
Well, to make it fair, you got to throw in the Force Awakens, because like the Phantom Menace, I just thought was like turgid, but it did, like, the pod race was kind of exciting. It had, you know, it had its moments, but the Force Awakens like makes me actively angry because in, you know, like the Star Wars holiday special did horrible things to characters who I loved, but it was kind of like, well, okay, it's on TV and this was clearly a mistake. But in the Force Awakens, it's just stupid. It's just like, hey, if we kill Han Solo, that would be dramatic. And it's like, no, it's just terrible storytelling. And so, you know, so I guess I would rather, oh boy, I'd rather watch the Phantom Menace, you know, because it's got some legitimately entertaining parts and a lot of boring parts. But if I had to watch the Star Wars Holiday Special, it's almost completely boring parts, and even the good parts aren't as good as the good parts of the Phantom Menace.
So the order is
is
Force Awakens, like bottom, then the Holiday Special, and then Phantom Menace.
Yeah, that's like fair ranking. Yeah,
I kind of had some questions for Andrew about some other things that are on your.
Oh, sure.
Well, first of all, Pumpkinhead 2 Blood Wings. Your credit.
Yeah.
Do you remember working on that? Because that's like a movie. That's like one of the first like gory like horror movies that like I was stayed up too late and watched on HBO. So like I have like a very specific memory of that movie.
Can we give some setup for our listeners and perhaps for me?
Yeah.
As well.
Oh yeah. Well, so I started off in the 90s bouncing around LA from a lot of, you know, it's why I have some sympathy for the Star Wars Holiday Special, because, you know, you don't always get exactly the writing job that you want. And sometimes you got to really make the best of whatever lands in your lap. And so I worked for a company called Motion Picture Corporation of America for a while, where they would just, you know, stuff would kind of come in on a conveyor belt, and I'd kind of get assigned to projects now and then. And Blood Wings was one of them, where I had a friend named Jed Weintraub who was a producer there, and he was, I think, a producer on this sequel to Pumpkinhead, and at the same time he was trying to take some of the movies that they were doing at the company and turn them into like video games, sort of early video games that used videos that were actual movie clips, and you would sort of play the movie clips. But Blood Wings, like, I came in because they got Roger Clinton, Bill Clinton's brother, to come in and do a cameo as Mayor Bubba, which of course Bubba was what Bill Clinton used to get called. And so they were wedging him into the story. And so like I had to write some scenes for Roger Clinton, and then I was also there, just on set for some reason. I don't know why. I can't even remember. Maybe I just showed up because I wanted to see Pumpkinhead getting filmed. But in the aftermath, and Amy Dolenz, who is the daughter of the sole remaining monkey, is one of the stars of it. But then in post-production, I showed up, and again, I think I was just delivering something, or I wasn't scheduled to be there, but they needed somebody they're doing the sound mix, and they didn't think the monster sounded horrifying enough. So I just, like, being loud, they just had me scream into a microphone. And so I'm the screams of Pumpkinhead. And also Pumpkinhead is this demon of vengeance who had been a poor wild boy who got bullied and murdered. And so I was also the screams of the wild boy. So that's like one of my proudest credits.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Really,
That's
it's a deep cut.
So you mentioned the full motion video games, because you also you wrote
Yes.
I remember the movie Soldier Boys from HBO too, and you wrote the full motion video game version of that. And
yes, which was relatively fun to play.
Yeah. I watched like part of a long play on YouTube. It was pretty fascinating. But then Darren Aronofsky directed some of those segments.
He did, oddly enough. I was there. He was directing the video game stuff, and I was like writing stuff. And I have a cameo as a shady mercenary who you can shoot in the head if you play your cards right. And it's interesting because like I remember like because he had been to AFI and he had done like a short film that was well received. And he was, trying to get his independent film going, because it's interesting. Like in my lifetime, it used to be that everybody wanted to do independent films, and now everybody wants to launch a pilot, because TV's pretty much a lot better than most movies nowadays. But Darren was, I had like an independent film. I was actually like on this job because I had sunk everything I had, and I was deeply in debt for doing Apocalypse Pop, available on YouTube.
I watched
that.
You
want to look it up.
Good.
But
we'll link it in the show notes.
But but like, so I was there, and Darren was talking about like, I got an independent film I'm working on. And I remember like he was bouncing ideas off me for what then would become Pi. And he was nice enough to give me a thanks credit in the end of Pi, just for, I don't think I contributed to any ideas, but he was bouncing ideas off me. Yeah.
So cool.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And everybody was like, yeah, it's going to be like, there's this Hasidic Jew, and he has this like way, this way to like, beat the Wall Street. And it was like, okay, well, that sounds like an independent film. It sounds very, very, and he's going to drill into his head at the end. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll see it. Yeah, sure.
Sounds good, Darren. You should do that.
You should totally do that. Good luck with that. One thing I like about Darren, like I'm not a fan of Requiem for a Dream, to put it mildly, but the thing I do like about Darren's movies is that a lot of independent films now have a sort of sameness. And, when I was growing up, like independent films were very, very weird. Like each one was its own weird entity, kind of like the Star Wars Holiday Special. It's just weird, And Darren's movies are always coming from a very distinct place. There aren't a lot of directors who do that. I mean, like the guy who did The Witch and The Lighthouse, he's like an exception. There are certain directors who still do it, but not a lot anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
No, that is certainly true.
I did watch American Bop, and that was like, I felt like I just uncovered like a kind of 90s independent film gem. So I definitely recommend people seek that out on YouTube.
I like it.
I think it was your character at the beginning. There was like a line at the beginning that made me laugh really hard when you were telling a story at the party at the beginning.
Well, and also it has future reality star Jenny Poulos, who's I forgot what her show is called, but anyway, she went on. She's in it.
Wait, now I want to know what that reality show is.
She's like the assistant for a very neurotic guy who I think is in real estate, but she sort of became like, the biggest star out of all of us out of it.
Flipping out.
Yep. That's it. With Jeff Lewis, I think is her boss. And she just in real life, that was her job, just being the exasperated assistant. But then suddenly she was exasperated on TV and became famous. So I love her.
I would love to say that I just pulled that from the deep recesses of my brain, but
wait, did I say American Bop before or Apocalypse Pop?
IMDb is.
I think I
it's
said American Bop
Apocalypse
before.
Pop. Yeah.
Well, I have enjoyed the hell out of this conversation.
Oh yeah.
Could you give us a tease or like a status update on the graphic novel? You said you've got about 16 pages.
Yes.
What's the adaptation like? Like, is it more or less the script as written, or have you changed it at all to fit the medium, or?
Yeah, well, so like I said, I started it out as a screenplay because I thought this would be like a good like Netflix because they have, I think specifically like there was a movie about Hervé Villechaize, and it was, just his life. And I just thought, well, if people are going to see a Hervé Villechaize movie about like 70s showbiz, or Argo was another good 70s showbiz story. And I
Oh,
thought,
yeah.
yeah, man, this is like a story people would, this seems worth it. So I wrote it in screenplay form and then adapted it to the stage. And so on stage, there's like more breaking the fourth wall and like talking directly to the audience and stuff. So the graphic novel kind of like takes some of the rewrites I did for the play and then reverse engineers it back kind of into, a screenplay form because a graphic novel is more like a movie than a play. And so, but
Sure.
it's pretty close to the story of the stage play with the characters and the dialogue and everything. I'm planning to launch the Kickstarter for that, and specialtheplay.com is where you can go and, if you want to email me to get on that list, and I'll update it with Kickstarter updates there. Yeah. No, actually, I got contacted recently by a guy in London who somehow heard about it and said that he had a theater troupe and they're doing plays about stuff, stories where like sort of show business or media interacts with real life. And he said, oh, that sounds interesting. And I sent it to him. He hasn't read it yet. And so nice. There was a nice London adaptation. And then I might get back together with Care Lord again. And, once we are absolutely guaranteed no more variants and we are definitely out of COVID, we could start planning a stage show. But I mean, it's hard to plan something months in advance knowing it could be derailed at any minute. So that wouldn't be until next year that we would even start considering maybe doing it on stage again.
Like I said at the top, I'm really glad that this hopefully is going to exist, the graphic novel of Special, because I really love the show. And it would be great to have this as a companion to the show, not instead of the show, but as a way to experience Special in a form that, can be shared and taken home with you.
Much like I, as a young Star Wars geek, watched Star Wars over and over again, and then bought the Alan Dean Foster novelization of it and enjoyed them both. Well, not equally, but yeah. And then the Marvel Comics adaptation. I was all in on Star Wars.
Amazing. So please visit specialtheplay.com and check out the Kickstarter for the Special graphic novel edition that I really sincerely hope you reach your goal, because I want this to exist for selfish reasons. And I can't wait until you're able to mount a new production, because I would love to see the show again.
Yeah.
I think
Hopefully in New York.
Well, listen, if there are any theater producers that are listening to this, please also go to specialtheplay.com. There's a link there that says, hey, if you have inquiries about, doing a production, we've had, like I said, a whole other theater company contacted us and just said, we'll do it. And I didn't get to see their production of it, but by all means, this definitely should be on stages all around America. So feel free to contact me through the site.
And hey, who knows? I mean, if we live in a world that can sustain not one, but 2 TV shows about the making of The Godfather, surely there's room for one about the making of the Star Wars holiday special, no?
Are there really 2? I didn't know there were 2 of them.
Yeah, there's one based on Robert Evans' memoir, and then there's another that is about, I'm actually forgetting off the top of my head. But yes, there's The Offer that's on Paramount Plus, or will be on Paramount Plus, and then I know there's another one. It's sort of like a Volcano Dante's Peak situation.
Or a Deep Impact Armageddon.
Deep Impact Armageddon, yeah. So yes, specialtheplay.com. Please consider backing the Kickstarter, because this graphic edition of Special should exist, and let's all try and help our friend Andrew make it a reality. And if you like what you heard, please consider visiting trashcompod.com, where you can rate and review the show. We are TrashCompod across all social media, and see you on the next one.